Hello students, this is Purvi here. Today we shall talk about the second chapter of economics from Indian economic development, that is Indian economy from 1950 to 1990. Now on August 15, 1947, India woke to a new dawn of freedom. Finally, we were masters of our own destiny after some 200 years of British rule. The job of nation building was now in our own hands. The leaders of independent India had to decide, among other things, the type of economic system most suitable for our nation, a system which would promote the welfare of all rather than a few. There are different types of economic systems, and among them, socialism appealed to Jawaharlal Nehru the most. However, he was not in favor of the kind of socialism established in the former Soviet Union, where all the means of production, that is, all the factories and farms in the country, were owned by the government. There was no private property. It is not possible in a democracy like India for the government to change the ownership pattern of land and other properties of its citizens in the way that was done in the former Soviet Union. Nehru and many other leaders and thinkers of the newly independent India sought an alternative to the extreme versions of capitalism and socialism. Basically, sympathizing with the socialist outlook, they found the answer in an economic system which, in their view, combined the best features of socialism without its drawback. Now, in this view, India would be a socialist society with a strong public sector but also with private property and democracy. The government would plan for the economy with the private sector being encouraged to be part of the plan effort. Economic planning means utilization of country's resources in different development activities in accordance with national priorities. Now, the Industrial Policy Resolution of 1948 and the directive principles of the Indian Constitution reflected this outlook. In 1950, the Planning Commission was set up with the Prime Minister as its chairperson. The era of 5-year plans had begun. The goals of 5-year plans were divided into two parts: long-term goals and short-term goals. A plan should have some clearly specified goals. The goals of the 5-year plans are growth, modernization, self-reliance, and equity. This does not mean that all the plans are given equal importance to all these goals. Due to limited resources, a choice has to be made in each plan about which of the goals is to be given primary importance. Nevertheless, the planners have to ensure that, as far as possible, the policies of the plans do not contradict these four goals. Now, let us learn about the goals of planning in some detail. Now, let us talk about long-term goals. The first is modernization. To increase the production of goods and services, the producers have to adopt new technology. For example, a farmer can increase the output on the farm by using new seed varieties instead of using the old ones. Similarly, a factory can increase output by using a new type of machine. Adoption of new technology is called modernization. However, modernization does not only refer to the use of new technology but also to changes in social outlook, such as the recognition that women should have the same rights as men. In a traditional society, women are supposed to remain at home while men at work. A modern society makes use of the talents of women in the workplace, in banks, factories, schools, etc. And such a society is, in most occasions, is also prosperous. Now, talking about self-reliance. A nation can promote economic growth and modernization by using its own resources or by using resources imported from other nations. The first 7 5-year plans give importance to self-reliance, which means avoiding imports of those goods which could be produced in India itself. This policy was considered a necessity in order to reduce our dependence on foreign countries, especially for food. It is understandable that people who were recently freed from foreign domination should give importance to self-reliance. Further, it was feared that dependence on imported food supplies, foreign technology, and foreign capital may make India's sovereignty vulnerable to foreign references in our policies. Now, let us talk about growth. It refers to the increase in country's capacity to produce the output of goods and services within the country. It implies either a larger stock of productive capital or a larger size of supporting services like transport and banking, or an increase in the efficiency of productive capital and services. A good indicator of economic growth in the language of economics is steady increase in the gross domestic profit, that is GDP. The GDP is the market value of all the goods and services produced in the country during a year. You can think of the GDP as a cake, and growth is the increase in the size of the cake. If the cake is larger, more people can enjoy it. It is necessary to produce more goods and services if the people of India are to enjoy a more rich and varied life. The GDP of a country is derived from the different sectors of the economy, namely the agricultural sector, the industrial sector, and the service sector. The contribution made by each of these sectors make up the structural composition of the economy. In some countries, growth in agricultural contributes more to the GDP growth, while in some countries the growth in the service sector contributes more to the GDP growth. Now, let us talk about the equity. Now, growth, modernization and self-reliance by themselves may not improve the kind of life which people are living. A country can have high growth, the most modern technology developed in the country itself, and also have most of its people living in poverty. It is important to ensure that the benefits of economic prosperity reach the poor section as well, instead of being enjoyed only by the rich. So, in addition to growth, modernization and self-reliance, equity is also important. Every Indian should be able to meet his or her basic needs such as food, a decent house, education, care, and inequality in the distribution of wealth should be reduced. Let us now see how the first 7 5-year plans covering the period of 1950 to 1990 attempted to attain these four goals and the extent to which they succeed in doing so with agriculture, industry, trade. Short-term goals. Short-term objectives vary from plan to plan depending on current needs of the country. For example, first plan focused on higher agricultural production, while in second plan shifted the focus from agriculture to industry. In India, growth and equity are the objectives of all the 5-year plans. The goal of current 5-year plan from 2012 to 17 is inclusive development. Agriculture. Now, we have learned in chapter 1 that during the colonial rule, there was neither growth nor equity in the agricultural sector. The policy makers of independent India had to address these issues, which they did not through land reforms and promoting the use of high-yielding variety seeds, which ushered in a revolution of Indian agriculture. Main features of Indian agriculture. Now, the main features of Indian agriculture included low productivity, disguised unemployment, dependence on rainfall, subsistence farming, that is, objective of farmer was to secure subsistence for his family and not to earn profit, traditional inputs, small holdings, backward technology, and landlord-tenant conflict. Problems of Indian agriculture. Now there were three types of problems that Indian agriculture had faced: general problems, institutional problems, and technical problems. Now let us talk about them in detail. First is general problems. Now general problems included pressure of population on land, the problem of land degradation, the problem of subsistence farming, social environment, and crop losses by pest, insect, flood drought, etc. Institutional problems. Institutional problems included small and scattered holdings, poor implementation of land reforms, and lack of credit and marketing facilities. Third was technical problems. Now, this sort of problems included lack of irrigation facilities, wrong cropping pattern, and outdated technique of production. Now let us talk about the various reforms in Indian agriculture. Those were institutional reforms or land reforms, general reforms, and technical reforms or green revolution. Let us discuss them in detail now. Institutional reforms or land reforms. At the time of independence, the land tenure system was characterized by intermediaries who merely collected rent from the actual tillers of the soil without contributing towards the improvement on the farm. The low productivity of the agriculture sector forced India to import food from the United States of America. Equity in agriculture called for land reforms which primarily referred to change in the ownership of land holdings. Just a year after independence, steps were taken to abolish intermediaries and to make the tillers the owners of the land. The idea behind this move was that ownership of land would give incentives to the tillers to invest in making improvements provided sufficient capital was made available to them. Land ceiling was another policy to promote equity in agricultural sector. This means fixing the maximum size of land which could be owned by an individual. The purpose of land ceiling was to reduce the concentration of land ownership in a few hands. The abolition of intermediaries meant that some 200 lakh tenants came into direct contact with the government. They were thus freed from being exploited by the zamindars. The ownership conferred on tenants gave them the incentives to increase output, and this contributed to growth in agriculture. However, the goal of equity was not fully served by abolition of intermediaries. In some areas, the former zamindars continued to own large areas of land by making use of some loopholes in the legislation. There were cases where tenants were evicted and the landowners claimed to be self-cultivators, claiming ownership of land, and even when the tillers got ownership of land, the poorest of agricultural laborers did not benefit the land reforms. The land ceiling legislation also faced hurdles. The big landlords challenged the legislation in the courts, delaying its implementation. They used this delay to register their lands in the name of close relatives, thereby escaping from the legislation. The legislation also had a lot of loopholes which were exploited by the big landholders to retain land. Land reforms were successful in Kerala and West Bengal because these states had government committed to the policy of land to the tiller. Unfortunately, other states did not have the same level of commitment, and the vast inequality in the land holding continues till today. Now, talking about general reforms. The general reforms included expansion of irrigation facilities, provision of credit, regulated markets and cooperative marketing societies, and support price policy. Technical reforms and green revolution. Now, the green revolution included the use of HYV seeds. Those were high yielding variety seeds. Also, it included the use of chemical fertilizers, use of insecticides and pesticides for crop protection, scientific rotation of crops, and modernized means of cultivation. Now let us talk about the various achievements of Green Revolution. Green Revolution helped to achieve the rise in production and productivity. It also helped in increasing the income. It also led to rise in commercial farming, left an impact on social revolution, that was use of new technology, high yielding variety seeds, fertilizers, etc. Also it led to increase in employment and a substantial rise in average. Now, Green Revolution failed at various parameters. It restricted to limited crops and areas such as two crops, that were wheat and rice, growing states like Punjab, Haryana, UP and Andhra Pradesh. Also, it led to partial removal of poverty. It neglected land reforms. Also, increase in income disparity between small and big farmers, as well as ecological degradation. Now, let us talk about industry. The role of industrial sector in India. Industrialization is important for overall growth of a country. The given points highlight the importance of industry as an economy. It provides employment, it helps in raising national income, it supports and promotes regional balance, it leads to modernization, it also helps to modernize agriculture, also leads to self-sustainable development, as well as gives high potential for growth, leads key to high volume of exports, also shows growth of civilization and brings change in basic structure of economy and source of employment, as well as imparts dynamism to growth process. Industrialization is a precondition for the final takeoff of an economy. Industrial development since independence. The share of industrial sector in the GDP has increased up to 20% in 2013 and 14. The given important changes have taken place, like development of infrastructure like power, transport, communication, banking and finance, qualified and skilled human resources. Much progress in the field of research and development could be seen. Also, it can be seen that the public sector has been expanded, has built up of capital goods industry, also has led to growth of non-essential consumer goods and industrial goods. Now let us talk about problems of industrial development in India. The various problems were highlighted. Those were sectorial imbalances. That means agriculture and infrastructure had failed to provide the support to the industrial sector. Regional imbalance. That means the policies were restricted to few states only. Industrial sickness, which raised the problem of unemployment. Higher cost of industrial product due to lack of healthy competition. Dependence on the government for reduction in tax or duty to make import easier. Poor performance of the public sector, underutilization of capacity and increasing capital output ratio. Let us talk about the role of public sector in industrial development. Now, direct intervention of the state was considered essential in the view of the given factors. Those were lack of capital with the private entrepreneurs, lack of incentive among the private entrepreneurs demand due to limited size of the market. Socialistic pattern of the society main aim of government was to generate employment rather than profits. Development of infrastructure, development of backward areas, also to prevent concentration of economic power and to promote import substitution. Industrial Policy Resolution, also known as IPR 1956. Now, industrial policy is an important instrument through which the government regulates the industrial activities in an economy. The 1956 resolution laid down by the given objectives of industrial policy. Those objectives were to accelerate the growth of industrialization, to develop heavy industries, to expand public sector, to reduce disparities in income and wealth, and to prevent monopolies and concentration of wealth and income in the hands of a small number of individuals. Let us talk about the various features of IPR 1956. The features of Industrial Policy Resolution of 1956 were new classification of industries. That means industries were classified into three schedules depending upon role of state. Schedule A, in which 17 industries were listed in Schedule A, whose future development would be the responsibility of the state. Schedule B, 12 industries were scheduled in Schedule B. Private sector could supplement the efforts of the public sector, with the state taking sole responsibility of the starting new units. And Schedule C, which comprised of other residual industries that were left open to private sector. The second feature was stress on the role of cottage and small scale industries. The third was industrial licensing. That means industries in the private sector could be established only through a license from the government. Fourth feature was industrial concessions. Now, the concessions were offered to private entrepreneurs for establishing industry in the backward regions of the country, such as tax rebate and concessional rates of power supply. Small scale industry. A small scale industry is presently defined as the one whose investment does not exceed 5 crore rupees. Now let us talk about the various characteristics of small scale industry. The first characteristics of small scale industry is that it is a labor intensive and employment oriented industry. Second, it shows self-employment. Third, is less capital intensive. Fourth characteristics is that it promotes export. Fifth is that seedbeds for large scale industries. And sixth, shows locational flexibility. Now these were the problems of small scale industries. First one was difficulty in obtaining finance. Second was shortage of obtaining raw material. Third was difficulty of marketing the products and services. Fourth was outdated machines and equipment. And fifth was competition from large scale industry. Foreign trade. At the time of independence, raw material was exported from India to Britain in abundance. On the other hand, finished goods from Britain were imported into India. Notably, our balance of trade was favorable. That means exports were higher than the imports, so that we could gain much profit. Now, the given changes were recorded in India's foreign trade after the independence. Those changes were a decline in percentage share of agricultural exports, increase in percentage share of manufactured goods in total exports, change in direction of export trade and import trade, decline of Britain as main trading partner. Trade policy. In the first 7 5-year plans of India, the trade was commonly called an inward-looking trade strategy. This strategy is technically known as import substitution. Import substitution means substituting imports with domestic production. Imports were protected by the imposition of tariff and quotas which protect the domestic firms from foreign competition. Now, what was the impact of inward-looking trade strategy on the domestic industry? We can say that it helped to save foreign exchange by reducing import of goods. It also created a protected market and large demand for domestically produced goods. As well as it helped to build a strong industrial base in our country which directly led to economic growth. Now, the import substitution strategy faced various criticism like it did not lead to growth. It also lacked competition that implied lack of modernization. Also, growth of inefficient public monopolies. Also, it did not lead to efficiency. Let us talk about industrial licensing. Licensing is a tool for channelizing scarce resources in predetermined priority sector of an economy. The Industries Development and Resolution Act, that is IDRA, was enacted in 1951 for industrial licensing. Now, what were the main objectives of IRDA Act of 1951? The main objectives were the regulation of industrial development in accordance with the planned priorities. Second was avoidance of monopoly. Third was balanced regional development. Fourth was prevention of undue competition between large-scale industries and small-scale industries. And fifth was optimum utilization of scarce foreign exchange resources. Now under this act, the following things were applicable. Those were: all the scheduled industries should be registered with the government. A license must be obtained by all the new industries. Government was authorized to examine the working of any industrial undertaking. Also, if the undertaking continued to be mismanaged, government can take over its management. Now, the industrial licensing faced various criticism, like there was an ad hoc system of accepting or rejecting an application for license. The quality of techno-economic examination conducted by Director General of Technical Development was generally poor. Licensing policy resulted in underutilization of capacity in many industries. In reality, the policy helped large business houses in accumulating economic power. Let us talk about permit license Raj. The licensing authorities many a times granted license to big business houses without proper scrutiny of their applications. So students, this was the second chapter from Indian economic development. Thank you.